Dr. Jessica Morgan's black BMW glided through the iron gates of Magnolia Springs with the kind of quiet authority that mirrored her own. She slowed at the checkpoint, where a uniformed guard waved her through, her name already on the list of approved residents, though the raised eyebrow and curt tone suggested disbelief that she belonged. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jessica noted it, filed it away, and kept driving, her eyes scanning rows of pristine two-story homes with brick facades and wraparound porches. It was early spring in Georgia, and the azaleas were in full bloom, the kind of curated beauty that screamed exclusivity. Her new address, 42 Oleander Court, was everything she wanted on paper. Good schools, safe streets, and a short commute to the hospital where she performed miracles on brains every day. But Jessica hadn't chosen Magnolia Springs just for comfort. She had done her research. Beneath the manicured lawns and white picket fences was a fragile financial ecosystem propped up by an HOA deep in debt. And she had quietly positioned herself to do more than just move in. The moving truck arrived behind her. As she directed the movers, she noticed curtains twitching. Neighbors paused in their yard work, their stares long and unbroken. Jessica kept her expression neutral, her mind clicking through the lessons her late mother, an attorney who fought housing discrimination, had instilled. Know the rules better than those who make them. She had barely finished supervising the unloading of her bedroom set when a knock rattled the door. On her porch stood a woman in her late 50s with a blonde bob sprayed into place and pearls clasped neatly around her neck. She wore a smile that felt rehearsed, a clipboard in hand. "Good afternoon," the woman said, in a tone too bright to be warm. "I'm Margaret Whitfield, HOA president. I wanted to welcome you personally and clear up a little confusion." Jessica wiped her hands on her jeans and extended one. "Dr. Jessica Morgan. No confusion here. I own the home. Just moved in today." Margaret's smile twitched.
Of course, it's just our policy that all new residents provide proof of residency, copies of the deed, mortgage details, employment verification. Oh, and we do require an orientation session before you can fully settle in. Jessica tilted her head slightly. That won't be necessary. The county clerk's office already recorded my deed. I'm sure your records will update. Margaret's grip on her clipboard tightened. Well, yes, but it's customary here. We just like to make sure everyone belongs. It keeps property values high and ensures community character. Jessica smiled faintly, the kind of dry wit only she recognized. I think I'll fit right in. The exchange ended with Margaret's polite retreat, but Jessica could feel the tension in her wake. As she returned inside, she slid open a locked filing cabinet, placing Margaret's card inside. The cabinet already held folders of research on Magnolia Springs, financial audits, property histories, lawsuits. This wasn't just her new home. It was the ground zero of a strategy years in the making. Across the street, Eleanor Washington watched quietly from her porch swing. At 78, she had seen this before, the polite harassment, the carefully coded language, and for the first time in decades, she felt a flicker of anticipation. This newcomer wasn't rattled. This newcomer was ready. Subtle menace and tension. Jessica establishes herself as calm and strategic, while Margaret represents the mask of institutional racism cloaked in standards. Margaret's failed intimidation plants the seed for escalation. The HOA will soon mobilize in full force. 2 weeks in, Jessica had collected more HOA mail than welcome baskets. The first notice arrived on day 3. Mailbox color non-compliant, must be HOA-approved shade. Day 5 brought another, improper window treatments visible from street. By day 10, she had received 8 citations. Her luxury sedan, improperly parked. Her garbage bins, visible from curb for more than 24 hours. Her lawn, slightly uneven. Every notice bore the signature of Richard Pemberton, treasurer, with Margaret's name neatly CC'd. Jessica kept them in a binder, each one annotated with photographs of neighbors' mailboxes, cars, and windows, identical infractions untouched. She wasn't angry. She was documenting, systematically. On Saturday morning, she drove to a quiet coffee shop outside Magnolia Springs, binder in hand. Marcus Williams, her family friend and attorney, waited with 2 lattes and his perpetual air of calm competence. He had worked alongside her mother decades earlier, and his sharp eyes caught details most people missed. 8 violations in 10 days. Marcus shook his head as he flipped through the papers. Classic harassment. They're setting a paper trail, hoping you'll fold. They picked the wrong homeowner, Jessica replied. What did you find on the finances? Marcus leaned back. They're bleeding money, close to $1 million in debt. Richard's been signing off inflated maintenance contracts. Money's vanishing. They're keeping it quiet, but it won't stay buried long. Jessica's lips curved into the faintest smile. Good. That means leverage. Back in Magnolia Springs, Jessica stopped by her mailbox. Eleanor Washington appeared on her porch, walking slowly but deliberately toward her. She carried herself with quiet dignity, her eyes warm but knowing. "You're handling yourself well," Eleanor said, her voice low. "Most of us tried at first. Then we got tired. Some left, some stayed and endured." She glanced at the binder under Jessica's arm. "I've been keeping records too. 3 decades of them. When you're ready, come see me." Jessica felt a rare ripple of gratitude. "Thank you. I will." That night, while organizing her files, Jessica noticed something unsettling. A small surveillance camera, disguised as a birdhouse, angled directly at her driveway. She checked her backyard. Another camera, perched higher in a tree, also pointed inward. None aimed at her neighbors' homes. She photographed them carefully and added them to the binder. Another piece of the puzzle. Rising frustration that also empowerment. Jessica is no longer alone. She has Marcus's legal insights and Eleanor's historical knowledge. The theme of knowledge as power takes root. Paper violations escalate into a direct public confrontation when the HOA tries to humiliate Jessica on her own property. Jessica pulled into her driveway after a brutal 36-hour hospital shift, still in her scrubs, her body heavy with exhaustion. But instead of rest, she found a tow truck idling in front of her house, chains rattling as a worker prepared to haul away her BMW. "Excuse me," she called, striding up. "What do you think you're doing?" "Order from the HOA," the driver said, shrugging. "Abandoned vehicle." "Abandoned?" Jessica pulled out her keys and unlocked the car with a sharp beep. "It's mine, registered, insured, paid for." Before the driver could respond, Margaret appeared on the sidewalk, Richard close behind. Margaret's smile was gone. Richard's smirk replaced it. "Dr. Morgan," Margaret began, voice sharp, "we had reasonable concern, a vehicle left unattended." "For 2 days while I was saving lives in an operating room," Jessica cut in, her tone calm but edged. "I have the deed, the registration, and the title. Would you like to see them?" Richard stepped forward, voice dripping with contempt. "You expect us to believe you can afford this place on a doctor's salary? Maybe you're into something else." Jessica raised her phone, camera recording. "Say that again." The tension snapped as flashing lights filled the street. A squad car pulled up, Officer Daniel Torres stepping out, hand resting on his belt. Margaret hurried toward him. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. She's been creating a disturbance." Torres's eyes moved to Jessica, then to the tow truck, then back to Margaret. His jaw tightened. "Ma'am, she lives here. I've got her residency on file." Jessica handed him her license anyway. He glanced at it, nodded, and turned back to Margaret. "No disturbance here. Just a resident defending her property."
This call is noted." His tone left no room for argument. Margaret sputtered. Richard swore under his breath. The tow truck rumbled off. Jessica lowered her phone, expression calm, though adrenaline coursed beneath her skin. As the crowd dispersed, Eleanor crossed the street carrying a weathered photo album and 2 worn boxes. "You'll want to see this. It's time." Inside Eleanor's modest but warm living room, Jessica opened the boxes. Neatly labeled files documented 30 years of HOA violations, fines, and letters, all disproportionately targeting Black and Latino families. Some families had sold under pressure, their homes quickly bought at discounts by companies tied to Richard Pemberton. Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. "This is the playbook," Eleanor said. "They harass, they fine, they call the police, they make you tired. And when you break, they profit." Jessica closed the folder gently. Then it's time to break the playbook. Confrontation and revelation. The subtle racism becomes explicit. But Jessica now holds undeniable evidence and begins to shift from defensive posture to strategic offense. Armed with Eleanor's documentation and Torres's implicit support, Jessica prepares to escalate her counter-strategy and turn the HOA's tactics against them. The small conference room in Marcus Williams' downtown office was cluttered with files, binders, and Eleanor's meticulously labeled boxes. Jessica sat at the head of the table, reviewing documents spread before her like a surgeon preparing for an operation. The air smelled faintly of coffee and determination. Eleanor adjusted her glasses and opened a folder marked 1987. Every fine, every violation, every call to the police. I kept copies. Families of color were targeted over and over. Some moved out within a year. Those homes, she tapped on a page, Pemberton's development company bought almost every one. Marcus leaned forward. "And Richard's been siphoning money. Inflated landscaping contracts, shell maintenance companies. It's embezzlement, plain and simple. The HOA is sitting on nearly $800,000 in debt." Jessica exhaled slowly, her mind turning over the possibilities. "If that debt's been sold—" "It has," Marcus interrupted, sliding a document across the cable. "A collections agency holds it now, which means it can be bought." Jessica's gaze sharpened. "Then we buy it." Eleanor blinked, startled. "You'd own the HOA's debt? You'd control them?" Jessica nodded. "Control means leverage." "They want me gone? I'll hold their future in my hands." The room fell silent, the weight of the decision hanging heavy. Marcus finally smiled, a flash of pride in his eyes. "Your mother would have loved this." Later that week, Jessica received an email from Jason Kim, a regional investigative journalist. He had noticed the flurry of HOA reports filed against her property and wanted to talk. Over coffee, Jason laid out his own findings, similar complaints against minority homeowners across the state, some eerily identical to Eleanor's records. "This isn't just your neighborhood," Jason said. "It's systemic." Jessica folded her arms. "Then let's prove it together." Strategic clarity. Jessica moves from defense to offense, deciding to seize structural power instead of fighting symptom by symptom. With her plan forming, the HOA prepares its most aggressive play yet, weaponizing the police against her. The Saturday sun warmed Jessica's back as she knelt in her garden, dirt under her nails, a rare moment of peace. It shattered with the wail of sirens. 3 police cruisers screeched to a halt in front of her house, doors flinging open. Guns weren't drawn, but hands hovered near holsters. "Ma'am, we got a call about a suspicious person trespassing here. Do you live here?" Jessica rose slowly, wiping her hands. Calm, steady. "I do. This is my home." Margaret stood on her lawn, phone raised, recording. "That's her," she called out.
She's been causing disturbances. Officer Daniel Torres climbed out of his cruiser, recognition flashing across his face. She's the homeowner, he said firmly, but his older colleagues pressed on. Prove it, driver's license, mortgage documents. Without hesitation, Jessica retrieved her wallet and a folder she had begun carrying everywhere. License, deed, mortgage. She laid them out like evidence on a table. More than enough? She asked, voice cutting through the tension. The senior officers exchanged skeptical looks. Could be forged. Torres stepped forward, voice steady but edged with defiance. That's sufficient proof. Continuing to question her is harassment. I'm documenting this call. His partners glared but backed down. Jessica locked eyes with Margaret, who lowered her phone with a sour twist of her mouth. For the first time, Margaret looked shaken. When the cruisers pulled away, a hesitant voice came from behind. Kevin Whitfield, Margaret's 22-year-old grandson, stood on the sidewalk. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I've seen things. I don't agree with her. If you need someone to tell the truth, I will. Jessica studied him. Sincerity, nervous but real. Then be ready. The truth will matter. That night, Jessica called Marcus. Buy the debt, she said. No more waiting. Crisis and courage. The false police call reveals the full weight of institutional racism, but Torres's defiance and Kevin's apology show cracks forming in the old guard. With the final straw crossed, Jessica arms herself with financial power and prepares for exposure on a larger stage. Jason Kim's article hit the regional paper like a thunderclap. HOAs target minority homeowners in a systemic pattern of harassment. The story anonymized Jessica, but featured Eleanor's decades of documentation. Social media picked it up within hours. Civil rights groups began calling. Meanwhile, Marcus finalized the purchase of Magnolia Springs debt through a shell company. Jessica now held the HOA's future in her hands. The knowledge settled on her shoulders like armor. Then came the call from Linda Morrison. The HOA's secretary, usually silent in meetings, asked to meet off-site. At a quiet diner on the edge of town, Linda slid a folder across the table, her hands trembling. Inside were printed emails, Margaret complaining about people who don't fit the neighborhood, Richard discussing leveraging fines until they sell. There were also spreadsheets, proof of Richard's embezzlement. My daughter's dating a black man, Linda whispered. She asked me if I'm proud of what we've done. I couldn't answer. I can't stay quiet anymore. Jessica touched her hand gently. You did the right thing. You'll be protected. Across town, Richard Pemberton was panicking. Unaware of Linda's betrayal, he shredded documents late into the night. Margaret called an emergency board meeting, intent on rallying the community against false accusations and outside agitators. Jessica, binder thicker than ever, prepared for the confrontation. The stage was set. Revelation and reckoning. Allies emerge from unexpected places, and the corrupt system begins to fracture under pressure. The emergency HOA meeting becomes the perfect stage for Jessica's revelation that she holds the debt and the power to remake the community. The emergency meeting. The Magnolia Springs clubhouse was usually reserved for wine tastings, yoga classes, and book clubs, but tonight it pulsed with tension. Rows of chairs filled quickly, homeowners murmuring, whispering, eyes darting between the HOA board at the front and the stack of manila folders tucked neatly under Jessica's arms. Word had spread quickly about the article, the debt, the accusations. For many, this was the first HOA meeting they had ever bothered to attend. Margaret Whitfield, pearls gleaming under fluorescent lights, slammed the gavel down with sharp authority. Order! This meeting has been called to address malicious rumors circulating about our community. Richard Pemberton leaned into the microphone, voice dripping with disdain.
They want me gone? I'll hold their future in my hands. The room fell silent, the weight of the decision hanging heavy. Marcus finally smiled, a flash of pride in his eyes. Your mother would have loved this. Later that week, Jessica received an email from Jason Kim, a regional investigative journalist. He had noticed the flurry of HOA reports filed against her property and wanted to talk. Over coffee, Jason laid out his own findings. Similar complaints against minority homeowners across the state, some eerily identical to Eleanor's records. This isn't just your neighborhood, Jason said. It's systemic. Jessica folded her arms. Then let's prove it. Together. Strategic clarity. Jessica moves from defense to offense, deciding to seize structural power instead of fighting symptom by symptom. With her plan forming, the HOA prepares its most aggressive play yet, weaponizing the police against her. The Saturday sun warmed Jessica's back as she knelt in her garden, dirt under her nails, a rare moment of peace. It shattered with the wail of sirens. 3 police cruisers screeched to a halt in front of her house, doors flinging open. Guns weren't drawn, but hands hovered near holsters. "Ma'am," one officer barked, "we got a call about a suspicious person trespassing here. Do you live here?" Jessica rose slowly, wiping her hands. Calm, steady. "I do. This is my home." Margaret stood on her lawn, phone raised, recording. "That's her. She's been causing disturbances." Officer Daniel Torres climbed out of his cruiser, recognition flashing across his face. "She's the homeowner," he said firmly. But his older colleagues pressed on. "Prove it," one demanded. "Driver's license, mortgage documents." Without hesitation, Jessica retrieved her wallet and a folder she had begun carrying everywhere. License, deed, mortgage. She laid them out like evidence on a table. "More than enough?" she asked, voice cutting through the tension. The senior officers exchanged skeptical looks. "Could be forged." Torres stepped forward, voice steady but edged with defiance. "That's sufficient proof. Continuing to question her is harassment. I'm documenting this call." His partners glared but backed down. Jessica locked eyes with Margaret, who lowered her phone with a sour twist of her mouth. For the first time, Margaret looked shaken. When the cruisers pulled away, a hesitant voice came from behind. Kevin Whitfield, Margaret's 22-year-old grandson, stood on the sidewalk. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I've seen things. I don't agree with her. If you need someone to tell the truth, I will." Jessica studied him. Sincerity, nervous but real. "Then be ready. The truth will matter." That night, Jessica called Marcus. "Buy the debt," she said. "No more waiting." Crisis and courage. The false police call reveals the full weight of institutional racism, but Torres's defiance and Kevin's apology show cracks forming in the old guard. With the final straw crossed, Jessica arms herself with financial power and prepares for exposure on a larger stage. Jason Kim's article hit the regional paper like a thunderclap. HOAs target minority homeowners in a systemic pattern of harassment. The story anonymized Jessica but featured Eleanor's decades of documentation. Social media picked it up within hours. Civil rights groups began calling. Meanwhile, Marcus finalized the purchase of Magnolia Springs debt through a shell company. Jessica now held the HOA's future in her hands. The knowledge settled on her shoulders like armor. Then came the call from Linda Morrison. The HOA's secretary, usually silent in meetings, asked to meet off-site. At a quiet diner on the edge of town, Linda slid a folder across the table, her hands trembling. Inside were printed emails. Margaret complaining about people who don't fit the neighborhood, Richard discussing leveraging fines until they sell. There were also spreadsheets, proof of Richard's embezzlement. "My daughter is dating a black man. She asked me if I'm proud of what we've done. I couldn't answer. I can't stay quiet anymore." Jessica touched her hand gently. "You did the right thing. You'll be protected." Across town, Richard Pemberton was panicking. Unaware of Linda's betrayal, he shredded documents late into the night. Margaret called an emergency board meeting, intent on rallying the community against false accusations and outside agitators. Jessica, binder thicker than ever, prepared for the confrontation. The stage was set. Revelation and reckoning. Allies emerge from unexpected places, and the corrupt system begins to fracture under pressure. The emergency HOA meeting becomes the perfect stage for Jessica's revelation that she holds the debt and the power to remake the community. The emergency meeting. The Magnolia Springs clubhouse was usually reserved for wine tastings, yoga clubs, and book clubs, but tonight it pulsed with tension. Rows of chairs filled quickly, homeowners murmuring, whispering, eyes darting between the HOA board at the front and the stack of manila folders tucked neatly under Jessica's arms. Word had spread quickly about the article, the debt, the accusations. For many, this was the first HOA meeting they had ever bothered to attend. Margaret Whitfield, pearls gleaming under fluorescent lights, slammed the gavel down with sharp authority. Order. This meeting has been called to address malicious rumors circulating about our community. Richard Pemberton leaned into the microphone, voice dripping with disdain.
Jessica launched the Magnolia Fund with her own savings and support from civil rights groups. Its purpose was clear: to defend families across Georgia from HOA harassment. Jason Kim covered its debut under the headline, "From Survivor to Reformer, One Woman's Fight Sparks Statewide Movement." Threats soon followed. Anonymous letters slipped into her mailbox warning her to watch her step, and certain neighbors greeted her with stiff smiles. But Jessica was no longer the type to be silenced. On a shelf in her office sat her heavy binder of records, both reminder and weapon. One evening, as golden light fell across Eleanor's porch, Jessica joined her for sweet tea. The sound of children playing floated through the street. Eleanor's voice carried quiet pride. "They tried to bury us for years, but you," she smiled, "you showed them we're the roots. We grow back stronger." Jessica let the words sink in. For the first time since moving to Magnolia Springs, she felt herself truly breathe. What began as a battle over property had become something larger, a reclaiming of history. The gates meant to exclude her had instead been forced open. The struggle had left scars but also built resilience. Justice, she realized, wasn't a single victory. It was ongoing, lived each day. Later, as winter settled over Magnolia Springs, snow blanketed the neighborhood in a rare hush. But the stillness felt different now, filled with warmth, laughter spilling from porches, and families gathering in the clubhouse without fear. Strings of holiday lights shone brighter, not because they dazzled more, but because they reflected something authentic: hope. Inside, the clubhouse brimmed with life. Folding chairs lined the walls, children practiced their pageant on stage, and tables overflowed with homemade food. Once a site of exclusion, the building now pulsed with belonging. Jessica stood quietly near the back, coat folded in her arm. She had lived her life by control, whether in the operating room, the courtroom, or community fights. But tonight, she allowed herself to simply be. The laughter, the music, the sense of cinnamon and cocoa, it wasn't a battlefield. It was a beginning. At the front, Eleanor Washington rose slowly, leaning on her cane. Though her body carried the weight of years, her presence silenced the room. She had witnessed every chapter of this place.
Magnolia Springs' fraught history. She had the scars to prove it, though she rarely spoke of them. Now, microphone in hand, she began softly, her voice quivering with age, but gathering strength with every word. "We endured," Eleanor said, her gaze sweeping across the room. "For years we endured fines. We endured harassment. We endured being told we did not belong in our own homes. And yet, we stayed. Because we believed one day change would come." Her voice steadied, her words cutting through the crowd. "And it has. Not because of one person, but because we all stood up and said enough."
Applause swelled, rolling through the clubhouse like a wave. For the first time in decades, Eleanor did not feel alone in her remembering. Her story was no longer whispered in shadows. It was spoken into light. After the meeting, Kevin Whitfield, Marguerite's grandson, hurried to Jessica's side, a clipboard tucked under his arm. His youthful face carried both nervousness and resolve, a man still growing into his courage. "We've got 42 sign-ups already," he said, excitement bubbling in his tone. "People want to work on the community garden project. You know how long my grandmother fought against that? Said it would lower values? And now, people are actually excited." Jessica smiled, a warmth blooming in her chest. Sometimes people just need permission to imagine something better. She glanced at the list of names, neighbors who had once looked through her, but now stood ready to build alongside her. It felt like proof of something larger than victory, transformation. As the last of the families filed out, Marcus Williams joined Jessica near the doorway, brushing snow from the shoulders of his coat. He handed her an envelope, he said. "It's official. The State Housing Commission wants you to testify. They're drafting legislation on HOA reform, and your case could help shape it." Jessica held the envelope, feeling its weight. She had come to Magnolia Springs for stability, not politics. She had wanted a home, not a platform. And yet here she was, her fight rippling outward, forcing change beyond these gates. She exhaled slowly.
Then it looks like this was never just about one neighborhood. Later, walking Eleanor home under a sky full of falling snow, Jessica listened to the sound of children giggling as they built a snowman in a yard once patrolled for violations. Parents stood nearby, talking easily, no longer casting suspicious glances. The world was not perfect, not yet, but the cracks had widened enough to let light in. Inside Eleanor's living room, the fire crackled. The house smelled faintly of cedar and old books. Jessica cradled a mug of cocoa, feeling its warmth seep into her palms. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes briefly, before opening them again to meet Jessica's gaze. "You've changed this place," Eleanor said softly. "Don't ever doubt that." Jessica shook her head gently. "We changed it. You, me, Marcus, Kevin, Linda, everyone who finally said no, together." Eleanor smiled, the lines in her face deepening, not with weariness, but with pride. For decades she had kept the records, waiting for someone strong enough or stubborn enough to use them. She had always hoped she would live to see the day. Tonight, sipping cocoa beside Jessica, she knew she had. Later, alone in her home, Jessica walked into her office. The binders, still neatly arranged on the shelf, sat heavier than ever. Thousands of pages of proof, of struggle, of resistance. They were tools, weapons if needed. But as she touched their spines, she realized they were also archives, not just of injustice, but of survival. For the first time since moving to Magnolia Springs, Jessica felt something she had not allowed herself to before. Not relief, not triumph, but belonging. The neighborhood had tried to reject her, to grind her down and push her out. Instead, she had stayed, and more importantly, others had stood with her. The snow continued falling outside, blanketing the lawns in soft silence. Magnolia Springs still bore scars, and no doubt battles remained ahead. But the seeds had been planted. In time, they would bloom into something larger than anyone had dared to imagine. Jessica stood at her window, watching the snow catch the glow of the streetlights. She whispered softly to herself, words her mother once told her. "Know the rules better than those who make them." She had lived them, and now she had rewritten the rules for everyone who came after. Magnolia Springs had tried to bury her, but she had rooted herself so deeply that when she rose, she carried the community with her. And as winter settled in, Jessica Morgan finally exhaled, ready for spring. 6 months had passed since the night Jessica Morgan revealed her hand and turned the HOA's carefully guarded empire on its head. The gated community of Magnolia Springs, once a pristine facade of manicured lawns and exclusionary whispers,
was now a different place, one in flux but unmistakably changed. No one could have predicted the chain of events that a single house purchase would set into motion. For Jessica, the last half year had been a whirlwind of reform meetings, legal consultations, press interviews, and the occasional quiet moment in her backyard garden, where the soil grounded her far better than the pomp of attention ever could. She had come to Magnolia Springs looking for a home. What she found was a battlefield. What she built was a blueprint. A community reborn. The neighborhood bore visible signs of its transformation. The gates were still there, but no longer patrolled by watchful volunteers taking notes about who belonged. The HOA newsletter had gone digital, translated into Spanish and Korean alongside English. The clubhouse, once the stage for Margaret Whitfield's carefully choreographed intimidation rituals, now hosted movie nights, potlucks, and tutoring sessions led by retired teachers like Eleanor. One Saturday morning, the new community garden opened. Rows of raised beds spread across what had been a field of grass strictly forbidden to be touched by residents. Now, children ran through rows of kale and tomatoes, their laughter blending with the chatter of neighbors exchanging gardening tips. Kevin Whitfield, Margaret's grandson, stood by the tool shed with a clipboard, helping volunteers sign up for shifts. He had traded his family's shadow for purpose. Jessica watched from a shaded bench, sipping tea from a thermos. She no longer felt like the outsider everyone scrutinized. People stopped to greet her with genuine warmth. She nodded politely, still cautious, still calculating, but no longer alone. Eleanor Washington, cane in hand, joined her on the bench, her eyes bright and tired all at once, swept across the garden. "Would you look at that? All these years, I dreamed of seeing something like this here." Jessica smiled. "You planted the first seeds, Eleanor. I just gave them a little water." Eleanor chuckled. "Don't downplay it. You taught them they couldn't keep the sun for themselves. You gave us all the chance to grow." The courtroom echoes. The HOA battle had not ended at the clubhouse. Federal investigations followed. Judge Patricia Okonkwo presided over hearings that stretched for months. Richard Pemberton was indicted for embezzlement and fraud, his smug grin finally broken under the weight of spreadsheets and witness testimony. Margaret Whitfield, though never criminally charged, found her reputation shattered. She left Magnolia Springs quietly, selling her home and retreating to her sister's estate in another county. Some said she never forgave Kevin for siding against her. The civil rights complaint Jessica filed, backed by Eleanor's meticulous records and Linda Morrison's leaked emails, had become a landmark case. The ruling didn't just address Magnolia Springs, it set precedent across the state. Discriminatory HOA practices were to be monitored under new regulations, with mandatory reporting and anti-bias audits. For Jessica, the victory was bittersweet. Laws could shift, but hearts changed slower. Still, she remembered sitting in the courtroom as Judge Okonkwo delivered her closing remarks. Fair housing is not a privilege to be granted by a select few. It is a right. Magnolia Springs has reminded us of the work still unfinished and also of the power of those who refuse to yield. Jessica had sat between Marcus and Eleanor that day, their hands brushing in solidarity. She had thought of her parents, of her mother's voice, know the rules better than those who make them. And for the first time, she felt she had honored that legacy fully. The conversation with Linda. One evening, Linda Morrison visited Jessica's home. They sat across from each other at Jessica's kitchen table, the room quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Linda looked different, lighter somehow, as though the weight of years of silence had finally lifted. "My daughter called me brave," Linda admitted, twisting the handle of her coffee mug. "I don't feel brave. I feel late." Jessica met her gaze. "Late is still better than never. You chose to step out of the shadows when it mattered. That takes courage." Linda's eyes welled up. "I just wish I'd done it sooner. I watched so many families get pushed out, and I told myself it wasn't my fight." "It was your fight," Jessica said gently, "but now you're helping to make sure it won't be someone else's."
The silence between them was heavy but not hostile. Jessica recognized in Linda the complicated truth of many people, those who weren't overtly hateful but allowed systems to keep turning because it was easier. Linda had chosen to stop the wheel, and in doing so, she had helped change everything. Jason's story. Jason Kim's articles had spread far beyond the county. National outlets picked up his reporting, framing Magnolia Springs as both cautionary tale and roadmap. His award-winning feature, The Gates We Build, How HOAs Uphold and Unravel American Inequality, quoted Jessica extensively. He had followed her journey closely, but with respect, never sensationalizing her story. One afternoon, he met Jessica in her garden to share his latest news, a book deal. They want to expand it, make Magnolia Springs the centerpiece, but connected to the bigger picture. HOAs across the country, redlining, zoning laws, everything your mother used to fight against. Jessica smiled faintly. She'd like that. She always said stories outlive the courtroom. Jason leaned forward. And your story, this story, will outlive Magnolia Springs. It's bigger now. People are listening. Torres's turn. Officer Daniel Torres had faced consequences too. His decision to document the false 911 calls against Jessica triggered internal investigations that rippled through the police department. Some colleagues resented him, but others quietly thanked him. Eventually, he was promoted to a community liaison role, tasked with building trust in neighborhoods like Magnolia Springs. One evening, he stopped by Jessica's porch while on patrol. "I wanted you to know," he said, leaning against the railing, "we're changing training protocols, using your case as an example of how bias weaponizes the system. It's not perfect, but it's something." Jessica regarded him with quiet respect. Change rarely is perfect. It's just possible. Torres smiled. "Thanks to you." Jessica shook her head. "Thanks to all of us. None of this happens alone." Looking ahead. In the spring, Jessica traveled to Washington, D.C. to testify before Congress. Her words were calm, deliberate, precise, just as they had been in operating rooms and HOA meetings alike. She spoke not only about discrimination, but about systems of accountability, transparency, and the need for reform beyond a single neighborhood. Her testimony, streamed nationwide, ignited debates that would shape housing legislation for years. Afterward, standing on the steps of the Capitol, she breathed in the cool air. She thought of her parents again, of the battles they had fought and lost, and of the ones she had inherited. She did not fool herself into believing the war was won, but the ground was shifting, and she had helped move it. Rooted at last. Back home, Magnolia Springs prepared for its first integrated summer festival. Food trucks lined the streets, musicians played jazz and gospel, and children of every background danced together without suspicion. Jessica moved through the crowd quietly, stopping to greet neighbors, shaking hands, laughing softly at the joyful chaos. She was no longer the target of stares. She was part of the fabric. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she sat in her backyard. The garden she had planted was in bloom. Tomatoes, basil, sunflowers leaning toward the last of the light.
Eleanor joined her, wrapped in a shawl, her cane resting by her chair. "You know," Eleanor said, "when I first came here, I thought I'd spend the rest of my life fighting. But tonight, I think I might get to spend the rest of it living." Jessica's throat tightened. "You earned that, Eleanor, more than anyone." They sat in silence, watching fireflies flicker in the twilight. Jessica's phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. 3 more HOAs want to meet. They want to follow Magnolia Springs' model. We're on to something bigger. She set the phone aside, letting the words settle. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind one last time. "Know the rules better than those who make them." Jessica smiled. She had done just that, and rewritten them too. The gates of Magnolia Springs no longer marked exclusion. They had become, instead, a symbol of what could change when people refused to yield. And as night fell, Jessica Morgan finally allowed herself the rarest of luxuries. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.